Okay, welcome back everyone. I'm glad to have Zinks on the show today. Um, always happy to have him along. Um, I think you were on the early audio only spaces that we did, Zinks, and provided some good alpha then, and you've been doing it ever since on Twitter. So thanks for joining.
Appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone.
Um, okay, we're going to sort of run through what's happened, well, now in the last sort of 10 days as opposed to a week, because we're a little bit later. Apologies for that. Um, Bitcoin purchase, biggest purchase yet, 325 coins. Now we've got 1,600. Um, you know, that's kind of what we're all here for, really, is that Bitcoin accretion. Did you want to add anything on that, Sinks?
Yeah, so obviously, 325 Bitcoin purchased, 1,600 in, you know, less than 3 months. It's an amazing rate of Bitcoin accumulation. Bitcoin per share has increased massively since our high on June the 20th. Our Bitcoin per share was like 157 sats when we closed at £5, and now we're at over 650. And yeah, as long as we keep accumulating Bitcoin, that's all that matters. And this the rate that we've done it, you know, faster than anyone else by a long shot. If you compare the trajectory to, you know, Metaplanet, for example, multitudes faster. Um, but yeah, pretty amazing. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to know that we've over 4x the sats per share um, in about a month, which is just unbelievable. Next was the release of Jesse's new metric, PBID, CNBC if you're listening. That's how you pronounce it. Um, uh, I'm going to bring it up, just the release. So this isn't just something that, it's not a new name for something. This is genuine research that Jesse's done. Probably one of the smartest people I've uh, had the pleasure of talking to, apart from using this, of course. Um,
No.
um, so yeah, do you want to just try and run us through a bit your thoughts about this, what it means, all that kind of stuff?
So, Jesse's PBID, which I find very, very useful, essentially allows you to see how long it would take you using the past Bitcoin yield to cover your um, MNAV premium. So, let's say if you buy into SWC, obviously here, but at the time of the release of this document, it would only take you 0.07 years based on the previous Bitcoin yield to make up your the MNAV premium. So it's similar to days to cover, but it allows the output to be measured in years, and you can adjust the yield depending on if you want to do a yield over the past year, you want to do it over the quarter, you want to do it the last 30 days. Um, so it's very, very useful. It's something that I've now been using myself, the PBID. Um, and it just shows you the pace of Bitcoin buying. It shows you, you know, if the company were to keep up that pace, you know, yeah, as I've already said, how long it takes you to cover that MNAV premium. Obviously, I would say you would have to use this in conjunction with, you know, roughly estimating yourself how likely it is for that Bitcoin yield to keep up and what it would look like over the next year. Obviously, this is hard to measure, hard to assess. So, you need to balance the two, and, you know, that will help you paint a picture, but definitely very, very useful. Um, and yeah, for the fact that this came out of SWC, well, obviously Jesse, yeah, it's pretty amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love that it came from SWC, but other than that, I think one of my favourite bits about it is that you can, by adjusting that time frame as to whether you're looking at the last month or the year to date or quarter to date, um, you can kind of gauge the slowdown or acceleration of a BTCTC,
Hmm.
um, which I think is quite useful information.
Uh,
Um,
Adam Livingston, he created a graph and he posted, it was pinned yesterday, that even if SWC's BTC yield declines by 50%, it would take us until about January, late January, to for anyone buying now to cover the MNAV premium. I think it was, yeah, 5,216 Bitcoin. But based on my own calculations, I think we'll surpass that by the end of the year. Ragnar, he has between 10,000 to 12,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. So obviously, it's not financial advice, but you know, the pace of accumulation, even if you reduce it by 50%, tells you that you're going to make up your the MNAV premium by late January, which is 6 months.
yeah, it's pretty insane. There's a lot of predictions out there. None of them are financial advice. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but it's nice to see people trying to work out models and stuff like that, and whether they're bearish or bullish. I still enjoy the fact that people are putting the time into to work these things out. Um, on the same day that the new metric PBID was released, we also got the results of the book build. Now that was 17.5 million quid. Um, it was listed as a minimum of 15 million. Now that obviously is lower than the last book build that we did. However, you know, um, uh, this isn't like a linear thing in my mind. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so a lot of people saw it as a bearish thing that the book build had attracted less money than the last time, but what they're forgetting is that you have to add it to the wider picture, the subscriptions, the ATM, and the pace of, capital raising is increasing, it's not decelerating. Obviously, there's going to be fluctuations every week, every month. When you're talking to institutional investors, you're not going to have a new one every week. We have to keep it realistic. It takes time to have these conversations, build these relationships. Smarter Web is the innovator in the UK. So who knows? There'll be times where in a couple of weeks there might be an institutional raise that's even more. And then there might be a month where there isn't any, but there may be some subscriptions. Um, in January, I think this is just a bit of a tangent. In January, they are considering changing the rules to allow the retail wraps to be expanded, which will open up another source of capital raising. And I think you just have to pull it all together and realize that as SWC gets bigger and bigger, there is going to be institutional capital coming. And I think Andrew mentioned this previously in one of the conversations with you, that he is talking to big institutional investors. So I wouldn't be surprised at some point we get an announcement. Um, with the ATM working, we know it's going to raise a minimum of 35 million plus. So I wouldn't be too concerned. The fact that we're still getting 17.5 million to me is bullish, if anything, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, and I think when we consider the big institutions, it's worth remembering that they're going to have so much bureaucracy and red tape and due diligence to do, legal teams, it's got to be signed off by 5 different people, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So the timelines on those, it's going to be bigger than, I don't know, a guy who owns a company who wants to chuck in £1 million.
Absolutely. And I think we were spoiled, really and truly, to be getting those accelerated book builds every week. That's not normal. This was SWC doing, you know, amazing things. And if you look at and compare to other Bitcoin treasury companies, you know, Metaplanet, for example, in December 2024, they had 1,700 Bitcoin, and it took them, until the middle of February to do another Bitcoin buy, which was only for around 300 Bitcoin. So, these things take time. And whilst we got this ATM working in the background, we know that Andrew's working very hard to build these relationships with these investors, and more money will come. It's just a matter of when, not if. So,
Yeah, for sure. And that sometimes there'll be lags. Sometimes we'll get maybe a couple turning up closer together.
yeah,
Um, it's just how life works sometimes, I think. Um,
absolutely.
Now, sort of projections. This is your forte on X, at least. Um, what are you projecting in the coming future?
So, by the end of the year, I've projected SWC to have between 8,000 to 10,000 Bitcoin. Now, obviously, with these projections, it's hard because a lot of it counts on, the ATM and whether we're able to raise capital. But, from my projections, if we can raise at a minimum £50 million a month, you know, by the end of the year, that's a lot of Bitcoin buying. I've seen price is a bit more difficult because it depends on MNAV. Um, but if you look back to when Metaplanet had their dip in February and it took them a little while to bounce back, and then they ended up 10x in even more than that. We experience periods of MNAV compression and MNAV expansion. Obviously, right now it's a period of MNAV compression. But if SWC gets to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year, and MNAV goes back to 5, I mean, you're looking at some very, very juicy numbers. With even the MNAV compression that we've seen this week and last week, the fully diluted MNAV is still roughly 5, 4 to 5. The MNAV now with the current shares is roughly around 3. So it's still highly accretive, the dilution. So as long as we just keep on buying Bitcoin, the numbers don't lie, and inevitably when there is MNAV expansion, the share price will follow. So I'm incredibly bullish. I've been adding to my position. I've bought SWC from the IPO at 2.5 pence, and I'm still buying now over 100x now £2. So, I'm here for the long run. Yeah, what about you? What do you think?
What projections?
Yeah.
I think I don't know. Maybe this is a bit too bullish, but everyone calls me a bear anyway, so they'll probably say it's bearish. I've got 10,000 in my head for the end of the year. Um,
Hmm.
that's not entirely calculated. I think it's not based off us continuing on a stupid trajectory. Um,
Yeah.
it's expecting it to slow. That's the question that none of us can really answer, is how is that slowing going to happen? Is it going to be linear, like a sort of a gradual thing? Is it going to have peaks and troughs because that's when money comes in? Um, so it's not always, using past data to do forward projections is never easy. And but I think based off the start that SWC have had, um, I don't think anyone could have seen us getting to 1600 in less than 3 months. Um, Certainly not in the first month, which kind of makes me think, oh, could it be even more than that? But then I think I kind of rein myself back in and I come back to the 10,000. But
On the 29th of May, we had 83 Bitcoin. Or it's the 20th or 29th of May, we had 83 Bitcoin. It's July the 23rd and we got 1,600. I mean,
it's unbelievable. It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
it's the best, it's the fastest that we've, that's fastest has been in the industry. OutBG, the French Bitcoin treasury, they've done absolutely amazing. But they started far, they had a 6 months plus head start. Um, so, I think where we are now is beyond what we could have expected from the start. I certainly did not project this from IPO. I've got a post talking about, oh, in 10 years' time, and I envision us being on FTSE 100 at £25 per share. And now that timeline has just gone from 10 years to, potentially a year or two. So, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all. It's been a crazy 3 months. Both in exciting and slightly uncomfortable. The last month being one of the uncomfortable month. So let's talk about the sort of sector-wide volatility then. How do you see it?
I think we probably saw a bit of exuberance, to be honest. A lot of rotation. I don't think we saw that much new money, but I think we saw a lot of rotation from Strategy to Metaplanet. They had their short squeeze, and then there was a rotation to all these treasuries. And what happened is people were moving along the risk curve further and further and further to, these companies that, have bought 10 Bitcoin and announced their strategies. But I think what's happened is, obviously people are taking profits. These things are cyclical. Seen it with Metaplanet multiple times. Every 4 months, there's, some MNAV compression inevitably expands again. And I think as we get more and more understanding of the industry, people are going to realize that actually, we're going to have to go back to quality. We're going to have to hold the premium Bitcoin treasury companies because, just because one company has managed to scale, all these other companies that are just pure Bitcoin treasury players are not going to be able to because Bitcoin prices keep going up. It's going to be harder and harder to accumulate Bitcoin to attract the volume, the trading volume that allows you to run an ATM. And then finally, obviously, you need to get enough Bitcoin before you can offer preferred shares to tackle the local fixed income market. So I think that's what's happening now. I think eventually, if you then the Bitcoin NAV on the balance sheet of these companies are basically the same. Bitcoin price is holding up very, very well. It looks ready to make a move up. And again, we're going to see MNAV expansion, but I think this time it's going to be more selective on the companies that are accumulating Bitcoin and are going to be dominant in their local markets. But that's just my opinion.
I mean, do you have any views on why there is that sort of 4 month cycle?
Um, I suppose it's just, you know, I don't know. We see it with Bitcoin, really. Price goes up, consolidates, a new floor is found, price goes up, and I think that's what happened. I think the pace of these treasuries going up was outpacing the amount of new money coming in, so there was a lot of rotation. As soon as another treasury announced, all the money would go there. So I think once we allow time for some new money to come in, once, Bitcoin goes back up a little bit, these companies keep stacking. It's the companies that can keep stacking in times like this, even if it's just a little bit, 20 Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin. These are the ones that are then going to be able to capitalize the most when we do get that MNAV expansion again. For why it being every 4 months for Meta Planet, I have no idea. Just the markets, really.
Sure. I mean, I saw a post, I can't remember exactly who it was, that said around the same sort of time that BTCTC started selling off, Bitcoin dominance dropped dramatically, or well, fairly dramatically, and that recently that's just started turning, and lo and behold, Metaplanet, AltBG have started turning as well. Have you got any thoughts on that? Or sorry, I don't want to wrong foot you, but
I think it's just people just going further and further along the risk curve. Now they're going back into the altcoins. It's just that's just what happens. The big companies, the premium companies make their runs, and then well, if we go back to the top, strategy had a run, and then it was Metaplanet, and then LBG, SWC, and I think it just goes further and further. And now the juice has been squeezed for now in this market, so people are gone investing in altcoins. I've seen Ethereum treasury companies now and things like that. But eventually, that attention, they're gonna squeeze all of that, and then what happens is eventually people go back to premium. They'll go back to Bitcoin. They'll go back to the premium treasury companies, and that's how I personally see it. Just degens being degens, really.
yeah, for sure. Okay, let's be a bit more forward looking then. You've definitely got some thoughts and ideas around preferred shares. So talk to us a little bit about the potential for SWC and preferred shares.
So preferred shares is how I see ultimately that SWC will get to the bigger numbers, that 1% goal of getting 210,000 Bitcoin. Ultimately, the money has to come from the fixed income markets. And to do that, right now, it looks like the mechanism is going to be via preferred shares. When I look at SWC's future, I see them being able to offer, smarter strike, smarter strife, these sort of products to the market. I personally, if a smarter strife came to IPO in the UK, I would personally put a good bit of money into that. I'm interested in that product. The strategy products in the UK, we have to pay a withholding tax, of 15%, some people 30%, if it's not held within a pension. So there's definitely, room and a market for it. Of course, we need to accumulate the Bitcoin first. I think Andrew mentioned a Bitcoin, a NAV of 400 to 500 million.
Yeah.
Me personally, I think, around 10,000 Bitcoin is, which at these prices is about, 8 to 900 million pounds worth. I think that's a good mark. And I think, it's just part of the flywheel, really. You've got the ATM to capitalize off the, volatility and the MNAV premium. But in down markets, or when the ATM's not going, having that, those preferreds allows you to obviously buy Bitcoin and accumulate more. And yes, the fixed income markets in the UK are worth trillions of pounds. Right now, 30-year gilt is over 5%. I would much rather give, my money to Smarter Web, and they're backed with the best collateral in the world. get a higher yield. And I think, once strategies built that in America, they get their credit rating for their products, for their preferreds. We will slowly see the world following suit, and it's those who can dominate their local markets. People always talk about how it's not a competition and these sort of things. Strategy is not really competing with smart web. Meta Planning and smarter web, but they're not competing against each other. But definitely domestically, whoever can dominate, with the preferreds in the UK is going to take the lion's share of the market. And that's just the truth. If smarter web wants to go from, 20,000 Bitcoin to 200,000 Bitcoin, they're going to have to tap into that the UK fixed income market. And with the preferreds, that's how I see they're going to do it.
Yeah, so it's not just about competing for retail investors, which I still think is a thing, but it's competing in the other markets as well. So who's going to dominate the preferreds? Who's going to get the institutional investment, etc., within your local market? I guess your point, you see it as maybe a 800 to 900 million ballpark, compared to Andrew's 400 to 500. My thoughts on this were if you do it at a smaller NAV, you just start with less shares, less preferred shares, and then through the ATM or through new issuance, you expand that. Do you think that makes sense, or am I being stupid?
Yeah, no, you can do that. I just chose 10,000 Bitcoin because it's a nice number. It takes you to, okay, you've got a chunk of Bitcoin on the balance sheet that you can collateralize these, preferreds with. Obviously, Andrew would have done the maths. If he's 400, 500 million and he's crunched that with Jesse and it makes sense, then absolutely. It wouldn't take long for that NAV of 500 million to go to 900 million anyways. Bitcoin, some people are predicting that it's going to go to $200,000 by the end of the year. So either way, as long as we keep accumulating, what's Bitcoin, a NAV of 400, that's around just over between 5 to 6,000 Bitcoin. So yeah, so I don't think if SWC can get to 5 to 6,000 Bitcoin, it wouldn't take them long to get to 10,000 Bitcoin anyways. I think obviously I'm assuming that the preferreds would have to come after a listing on the LSE. So, that's what I think. Obviously, it's just my prediction and this is what I think. So I think, yeah, however long that takes, towards the end of the year.
What's your prediction for LSE uplisting? I've got mine.
September, October.
Okay.
Before then, I would, and I think it would be nice. Aquis has been amazing, and it's definitely, a great exchange to get started on with. But I think, I made a post about it. But I definitely think for the institutional investors, is something that's like, it adds to the legitimacy and the premium of the SWC brand. And the last thing you want is another company to be like, oh, here we are, we're on the LSE. And I think the beautiful thing about SWC uplisting is we'd be able to get straight into the FTSE 250, which then allows us to capitalize off that those passive flows. And, we can just cream that, through the ATM and convert that into Bitcoin buying. But yeah, to answer your question, I'm going to say October latest. What about you?
Yeah, so roughly, yeah. I think based off an early comment from Andrew that said when we're at, I think it was 30 or 40 million market cap, they'd be looking at starting the process, and that he predicted that would take approximately 4 months. And then from that, I've taken like a bull case and a bear case. The bull is early September because Andrew tends to underpromise and overdeliver. That's been my experience of him so far. The bear case is kind of end of October because there's some hurdles that take a bit longer than anticipated.
Okay.
So kind of in the same ballpark as what you're saying.
See, that's super exciting because being listed into the FTSE 250, I don't think that's priced in. You know, the passive flows going into SWC, just buying every month, quarterly rebalances. That's all just extra,
Mm.
uh, you know, MNAV premium really. And that's just, that money just converted into, yeah, buying Bitcoin and, being on the FTSE 250. It just opens up the door to more institutional investors. Oh, this is a growing unicorn. This is, smart web. It's gonna attract just more and more attention, and then it will just be inevitably, when it gets to the FTSE 100. I don't think we've not seen the exponential growth yet. We obviously we have, but we're not on um, the deepest bit of the slope yet. The steepest bit of the slope, sorry. There's still a lot more to come. Um, you know, I'm extremely excited, very excited.
Yeah, I think the passive inflows and stuff. Was it block? I know it's a bigger index, but block going up into the S&P 500 and they went up 23%.
Yeah,
Um, just just as a result of it.
because
Yeah,
these indexes they have to buy the shares,
yeah,
have to. So could you imagine October, and we don't know how much Bitcoin we're gonna have, our market cap. It's gonna be bigger. They're going to have to buy more, a decent amount of shares, and we should see a jump. What that does to the trading volume, to the volatility. And then every quarter, what's going to happen is SWC, as the Bitcoin NAV grows and grows and grows, we're going to take up a bigger and bigger percentage of the FTSE 250. So that means more and more money. It's a feedback loop. Same with the FTSE 100. And I think what people don't realize is that it's far easier for SWC to get to the top of the FTSE 100 than it is for strategy to get to the top of the S&P 500, because they're competing with Tesla, Nvidia, all these companies. Whereas, if you look at the FTSE 250 and you look at the FTSE 100, we're competing with Trainline and JD Sports. It's not the same. Oh
yeah.
man,
And there's no Mag 7 of the UK really, is there? Um,
exactly.
so yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. Um, okay, so you and Ragnar have been putting out some pretty bold statements about where we sit in the sort of wider market of BTCTCs. Talk me through it. What's your thesis on that?
So yeah, Ragnar, Roaring Ragnar, for anyone that doesn't know who that is, should give him a follow. We've been speaking quite often, and how we see the market is actually quite similar. We actually have the same, so we both own Strategy, SWC, and MetaPlanet, um, but our allocations are just slightly different. Obviously, I've got a higher percentage in SWC. I'm British. I see big things for smarter web. But what we've come to understand is that there's certain key things that a Bitcoin treasury company needs to really to really win. And the first thing is that that I'm looking at is the local capital markets. These American companies, okay, America's got the deepest capital markets. It makes sense for Strategy to be the largest Bitcoin treasury company in the world. Obviously, they started a cycle ahead, so they're obviously going to dominate. But if you look around the world, you know, there's out, London has deep capital markets. There's not many places that can compete with London. Tokyo has deep capital markets. Um, so, outside of London, Tokyo, maybe Hong Kong, that's it really. Outside of America, smart web, benefits from having, you know, the financial center, one of the financial centers of the world. And I think this is significant because not only can we have access to a lot of domestic capital, but also, international capital flows through London. So that's one thing. Another thing is, the community. I think we've got the third largest out of all the Bitcoin treasury companies, and we only started 3 months ago. Our community is far bigger than, Semler, who started their community ages ago. The enthusiasm, the we've got an excellent team. We got Andrew, who it's a loyal shareholder base. These things matter because it allows us to have the higher MNAV, which then allows our dilution to be even more accretive. I call it the retail flywheel. So there's that. And, dominating the local market is very important as well. The biggest Bitcoin treasury companies are going to be those that win first domestically and then can compete internationally. Smarter Web, based on my assessment, has established that it's going to be the biggest Bitcoin treasury company in the UK. It's got the best practices, and just like Metaplanet in Japan and Strategy in the US, I think once you create a lead, the more and more Bitcoin that we accumulate, the more it's going to become insurmountable. So I think when you add all these things together, the deep capital markets, G7 nation, rich country, well, for now, you got amazing CEO, great team, Jesse, the loyal shareholder base. It's very, very hard to replicate. Very, very hard. And I don't think there's going to be many companies that are able to replicate that.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of add another layer to the UK deep capital markets is that they've been starved of growth. Well, for well over a decade, 15 years. We've seen nothing like what the States have been capable of doing. We're more akin to Japan in a way. And I think a lot of people have overlooked that. And potentially with the LSE uplisting and preferreds coming on the scene, I think there's going to be quite a lot more interest than people think in a company that is growing at that kind of pace.
Absolutely. I think we've front run a lot of people in London. Retail has always been front running the institutions in Bitcoin for the past 16 years. And I think what happens with, especially going on to the FTSE, people in London are going to be talking about it more and more and more. Who's the best performing company in the UK? Smart Web. Who's got the most amount of gains on the FTSE? Smart Web. And who's the leanest company? I done a comparison on, another £1.1 billion company, Trainline, and they've got 990 full-time employees. I think Andrew said they've only got 2 full-time employees. You expand that to even 10. We've got the room, we've got, permission from shareholders to actively dilute the stock. It's only a matter of time before the best talent, joins Smart Web. It's the one unicorn, like you said, in the market starved of growth. I mean, what other British company can you think of that you even want to put your money in? I don't know any.
I haven't for years.
Exactly. Like there's nothing else out there, and I think the whole story around Smart Web being a British company that can finally, do big things powered by Bitcoin, an actual British company, by the way, not just a UK listed company, because anyone can list in the UK, a British company with a British CEO, with British stakeholders. I think it's just primed. It's got everything about it to, catapult to the next level. But FTSE 250, that is a significant marker for me. And I expect things to escalate rapidly from there.
Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to the drama from last week, the leaked document with regards Satsuma saying that UTXO were not only invested but also were brokering money as part of that deal.
Yeah.
Where are you at with that?
It doesn't sit right with me, honestly. Obviously, everything's been said and whatnot. I'm still, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth because, you know, obviously UTXO have come out and said that basically they're going to divest as soon as possible, and Henry Elder has left UTXO. Obviously, that document, just to be clear, was essentially a Japanese venture capitalist trying to raise money for a SPAC to invest in this company, and they said it's come from UTXO. It's got all the numbers. So who knows? Only, these people will know if it's true or not. I do think that, obviously UTXO are big investors in SWC. I think they were saying that they seeded this company to eventually merge or do something with SWC, but obviously that hasn't worked out. So I'm hoping, obviously, that they do divest as soon as possible, because of course it's a conflict of interest. You can't have these two, we're not the US. These, Bitcoin adoption's a bit slower here, and they will be competing. There's no doubt, doubt about it. There's a limited market here, the fixed income market. But either way, with that being said, I still think quite confidently that SWC is going to be the number one company in the UK regardless. Like I said, with SAT, it's a UK company in name only, listed in the UK. I think it's a subsidiary of a company in Singapore. Don't quote me on that. Obviously Henry Elder is an American man. A lot of the investors are from outside the UK. But either way, I think as long as SWC just focus on its mission, Andrew has been the one leading this project. Most of the fundraising, I can imagine, has come from him. He is the moat. He is the reason why a lot of us are here. So, me personally, I think we'll be fine. I just hope that things are kept above water and there's no weird stuff going on. I don't like that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't want to delve into like conspiracy theories of what may or may not have been going on. But for me, the fact that public statements have now been made about the situation, it gives us the opportunity to draw a line under it, move on, and keep executing the plan. I'm just annoyed that this has probably wasted Andrew's time trying to sort it all out.
Yeah, definitely. It would have been a distraction, but like you said, public statements have been made. It is what it is now. Whatever happened has happened. Smarter Webs, is going to be completely fine. UTXO have the incentive to make sure that Smarter Web is fine. It's their largest investment that they have in their portfolio. So, if that makes us innovate more, move quicker, perhaps, then so be it. But I think we have a healthy lead, and I think it will continue. And yeah, like you said, as long as the execution is still there, we've set industry standards because of Andrew's principles and the way he's done things, and I've seen that myself. We've managed to influence other CEOs in the space who have realized, for example, not doing discounted raises is a good thing. And these things all matter, and that's why SWC has the MNAV premium that it has, because retail ultimately believe that, you know, SWC is going to continue moving forward and, you know, execute this Bitcoin treasury strategy in the best possible way. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm afraid we've got to finish there because I've got another appointment in a minute. So, Zinks, thank you very much for coming on. I think we're both still just as bullish as we've always been on SWC, and looking forward to the weeks and months coming up. And hopefully, you'll come on again another time.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on. And thank you for all your good work that you do in the community. You know, this community has been amazing since you started it. And yeah, we all appreciate that. And yeah, I'm incredibly bullish on SWC, extremely confident in Andrew. Not financial advice, but it's an amazing entry now, guys. But
Buy the
yeah,
fucking dip.
yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much. And there won't be a live stream on Friday, everyone. The next one will be a week on Friday, and I'm hoping that Jesse is going to be joining us. So it'll be me and Jesse next week. All right. Take care, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.